Hey, what's going on, guys? Field Agent Reaper here, and in today's video, doing something a little different, but I feel like it was a very important topic to discuss. So, the developers on Twitter put out a developer roadmap slash update for the upcoming PTB of the first Tuesday of September, and it is actually probably going to be one of the biggest potential changes to DBD we have had in a very long time, and because of this, I actually wanted to discuss it. So, you are probably already very familiar on some of the things that are already getting added to the game in this next PTB, but if not, I'm going to go over all of it, but I wanted to give my thoughts and opinions and things that I think are good and things that I think maybe need to get changed or just not get added. So the first thing that they are actually adding to the game is an anti-slug reduction update mechanic, and if survivors are left in the dying state for a total of 90 seconds during a match, they gain the ability to pick themselves up after fully recovering. Now, I think this is probably the most problematic aspect that they are adding to the game because yes, slugging can be pretty unfun for survivor, especially when you're getting stomped by the killer, but to be honest, this is a very, I guess you could say, gray area because sometimes killers have to slug. If you're in a situation where the game is about to be over, gens are about to pop or doors are about to open, and you start chasing someone that you haven't even hooked yet, you're probably gonna wanna just slug them and leave them on the ground and then go after someone else. You shouldn't get punished for trying to make just a good play by creating slug pressure. I think slugging does belong in the game, and when used correctly can be a very, very good tool for the killer in very, very bad situations. Something else that I think is very problematic about this is the fact that survivors, especially if they're playing on comms or they're just aware of what other players are doing, you can go down under a pallet and basically make it so that you get free recovery time on this 90 seconds by just being by that person on the ground, and the killer cannot pick up, because if they pick up, they get pallet stunned, and if they don't pick up, they're going to gain a bunch of progress towards that 90-second pickup. And the crazy part about this 90 seconds is you're probably thinking, well, 90 seconds is a decent amount of time. Well, the thing is, this 90 seconds doesn't reset. Once it starts going up, that survivor is locked into that amount of time they have getting up off the floor. So once that hits 90 seconds, they get permanent unbreakable for the rest of the trial, which is, I think, absurd. I think that is absolutely absurd, and I think that is just not okay. And this is the one thing I am not a huge fan of the most out of this whole patch. I don't like this at all. Now, there's some other things they are doing with this where the survivors get more crawl speed when they're left in the dying state for longer. I mean, I feel like that could be okay. That's something I kind of want to see play out on the PTB a little bit to see if that's okay. But to be honest, I'm just not a fan of this 90-second timer. I think that is way too lenient, and I think it needs to be something that's a little bit on the higher side if they are going to keep this. And I'm talking at least 150 seconds minimum. Seriously, like if it's lower than that, you start, looking at the potential of abuse from teams and just overall not being a fun mechanic for the killer, especially in very dire situations where you have to slug. Now, moving into the next change, this is probably even bigger than the previous part, but I think has the most potential to actually add something to the game. I think there are some very cool aspects about this and some very, I guess you could say, uncool aspects about this. So they are trying to reduce tunneling as of this next patch, and the first thing they are doing is whenever a survivor is hooked, it is actually hidden from the killer, and when they are unhooked for at least a short bit, it actually will not notify the killer right away that they have been unhooked. So this is supposed to prevent killers like Blight or Freddy or just any killer that can get across the map very, very quickly to basically get back to the hook and try to tunnel that person out, or just any killer in general. Obviously, killers that can teleport or who have mobility are going to be the biggest contenders for doing this, obviously. But I'm not a huge fan of that, to be honest, mostly for the fact that I just think that kind of information is very crucial in certain situations. I don't know. I think this is one of those things where I kind of want to see how it plays out on the PTB, see how long the time is before I make any sort of pure judgment on this change. But I really do not think this is going to be something that is very good for the game, but again, this one's a weird one, but we'll see. I want to hear what you guys think too. You guys tell me what you think of all these different things we're discussing. So another thing too is whenever survivors get unhooked, they gain the following effects for a limited time: the haste, the endurance, and the new elusive status effect. That's something I'm going to talk about in just a second. I think this could be interesting, but again, it's one of those things where in a perfect world it sounds cool, but there's a lot of gray area with something like this where you are punishing the killer and not punishing the survivors for making misplays. And what I mean by that is whenever a survivor gets unhooked, this new elusive effect basically just gives them, you know, no noise, like iron will, no blood, no scratch marks. It basically gives them a chance to get away. Everyone knows there's that time when you're playing killer when someone gets unhooked and you can't find anyone, you go, okay, I'm just gonna go after the unhooker, but you can't find the unhooker. They have unhooked and they have disappeared, and all you see is the person that unhooked, and you go, you know what, I guess I'm tunneling because I don't know where this other person is. And that's a misplay on the unhooker's part. They should take aggro. Now I think again this is one of those things where maybe if they showed the unhooker's aura for a few seconds so they couldn't just hide, it could be interesting, but I'm not 100% sure. Again, this is one of those things that they might need to tweak quite a bit, but it does have potential. And one of the things I'm a huge fan of though is no more collision with players, killers, and survivors when you get off the hook. So this actually solves two huge problems that happens in the game, and the first one is the survivors are body blocking the killer so they can't go after the unhooker because they have that endurance. You can just walk through that person now, which I think is huge. That's something everyone's been asking for a long time. And another thing is when the killer is body blocking the staircase to basement or some sort of choke point on a really weird hook, and that person who gets on, when that person gets off the hook, they just no longer are able to actually do anything and they just get killed immediately. And if they don't have decisive, then well, that's pretty much it for that survivor. I think this is a huge, awesome change. Big fan of that. I'm very glad they added that. Another one is immunity to killer instinct and see the killer's aura nearby. Now, depending on how long this is, I'm not a huge fan of this, especially as a pinhead player, because what happens if the survivor goes and they start solving the box immediately? This is one of those things why I think touching the box should count as a conspicuous action. You are progressing the game by disabling the killer's power. I think that should absolutely, you know, be changed. Maybe some killers you can make the argument that you don't want to do that, like pig traps or something like that, but with the box, I think that should be conspicuous action, and I'm not a huge fan of that depending on how long the time is going to be. And moving on, some of the other things that are actually pretty neat actually that they're doing for killer, which I think has the largest potential to be something that is very good that a lot of people have been asking for a long time, is whenever the killer gets a unique hook on a survivor that isn't hooked consecutively, killers get the following benefits: bonus damage to the next generator kick, depending on how high that is. That could be really nice. Temporary haste status effect, I think that's also very nice. Temporary reveal survivors, I think barbecue and chili, I think that's what they put it as. Base kit, barbecue, and chili. Yeah, that's what they said. I think that's awesome. I am a huge fan of that. And these effects are slightly lessened for killers like Blight, Dark Lord, Ghoul, Hillbilly, and the Nerfs, which I think is awesome that they're actually going to nerf that effect on killers that are already really good. I'm a huge fan of that. I'm actually so excited for that. The fact that they're going to make it so that killers that are a little bit weaker have a little bit more going for them. I think this is actually really cool and one of those things I'm a huge upside for. But if they're going to actually start doing this, we may start, the developers may want to start looking at the potential change in slowdown perks, because if you start giving some really good buffs to killers that are already running these quad slowdowns, I think can be really frustrating. I think it's one of those things that could be looked at, but it really depends on how strong a lot of these are. But I'm a huge fan of these changes. And now probably the most controversial change coming to this patch. If a survivor dies before 6 total hook states, all survivors gain a repair speed bonus for the rest of the trial. And I believe the killer also can no longer damage or regress generators if this happens. I think this is a terrible idea, and I think this is super bad. This should be 3. This should absolutely be 3 hooks. If they are going to put it in the game, it should be 3 hooks. If you tunnel one person out, I think it should be 3 hooks. I think 6 is absurd, and there are plenty of situations in games where you're unable to bounce from target to target, where you have to focus 2 people a little bit more than 4, and then you might just kill one of those survivors at 5 hooks. It's not uncommon, especially if you're playing a weaker killer on a survivor-sided map with players that are decent at the game. It's just gonna happen. Not a huge fan of this. Now, if they are very keen on adding it, it needs to be 3 hooks. It needs to be 3 hooks. And then I think maybe, I don't know, maybe what they do is when you've hooked to that second survivor, maybe a second time, you get aura read on other players. So maybe it gives you the opportunity to, I don't know, catch someone else so you don't feel like you have to tunnel that person out. I don't know. This is one of those things where I just don't feel very good about this getting added to the game. And I feel is going to be very problematic just because, again, it's not a black or white kind of issue. There's a lot of gray area, and I think can really punish killers who aren't trying to tunnel to be jerks, but they have to. You know, there are many situations where, you know, maybe you have 4 hooks, you have 2 hooks on 2 different survivors, and the person that just got unhooked, you know, they're the easier target. You're already at 2 generators, 1 generator. You can't just go and, you know, maybe that person's still injured and the other person is healthy, and you're playing a killer like Trapper where you can't just do something about that. So I think that's kind of a huge problem and needs to be looked at. And now talking about the elusive status effect, now it's just going over it again, is the survivor's grunts of pain are suppressed, the survivor's auras suppressed, pools of blood and scratch marks. Again, in a perfect world, I think this would be really neat, but unfortunately what happens is a lot of people unhook and then they just hide, and then their teammate who just got off unhook has to take aggro again because the killer is coming looking for the unhooker but can't find them. I think maybe this should be changed a bit in some degree. I'm not a huge fan of this, to be honest, but yeah, those are the main aspects. And then we're actually moving on to the killer updates. The big one that has everyone talking is the shape rework. They are reworking Myers like crazy. So instead of just having evil within, he now has 2 separate modes. One where he moves slower, but he's undetectable and can stalk survivors. And then he has pursuer mode, which is faster and has a slightly smaller tear radius than normal, 24-meter tear radius. Increased vault speed and lunge range, can, you know, break pallets and all that fun stuff, but can't stalk survivors. Once the stock meter is full, evil incarnate mode can be triggered whenever you want. So basically, you no more 90-90. You just get it to 100% and then you press a button, I'm assuming, and then boom, you just get tier 3, which I think is really interesting. And I think overall, this is actually a pretty neat buff for Myers. But I think a lot of the issue people have is this new charged pig dash kind of attack. I'm not sure how I feel about this, but I'm very curious to see how it plays out. It could be really interesting, could be really fun, but I'm not 100% sure. It's one of those things where I really want to play it on a PTB to see how it is. And then the cool thing too that they're making is that if a survivor is on death hook and you enter the tier up mode, the evil incarnate, then you can actually just grab survivors and just kill them on the spot, which I think is kind of interesting. I think that's very thematic for Myers. And then, of course, they've reworked a bunch of his add-ons, and survivors no longer have a limited pool of stock, which I think is also crazy. So you can just stalk everyone, and I think that's crazy. So I think this could be really fun. I think this could be really fun, but again, this is one of those ones I actually want to see. And then Clown is getting a minor update. They're not really addressing the issue with him. The only thing they're really changing is the activation time of the speed bottles when you throw them on the ground, which I don't think was, I mean, it was a little bit of a problem, but I think it's kind of, you know, kind of a bad thing that they're not going back on these speed changes. I think that's a little crazy. I think they really need to reconsider that. And then they're also making the increased how long the Afterbeast Tonic's hindered effect lingers after leaving the smoke. I'm not really sure. I mean, I guess that's okay. I don't really know. But I don't know. I just feel like Clown is still a very problematic killer, and they really should have just reverted him. And then talking about Unknown, this is probably one of those changes everyone can agree is a great one. They're adjusting some add-ons, increasing camera vertical range. So basically, I believe you can look up more and look down more. So you can actually do some really interesting, you know, close shots or long shots now, instead of having to awkwardly try to angle yourself so that the survivor can't just run directly back into you. I think that's really fun. I think that's fun. I think that's going to make Unknown actually much more enjoyable to play. And then I think just overall every change they're doing to him is a very good one, but I'm excited to play him. And then the Dark Lord is also getting changes where the vampire form is a slightly reduced hellfire cooldown, which I think is very cool because it feels very long, and because of that, it doesn't feel very good to use. You pretty much just go dog form, use dog form, swap the vampire, use hellfire, and if you don't hit it or hit it, then you just swap back to dog form because dog form is so good. And they're increasing the hellfire pillars by 1 as well, which I think is crazy. So you're gonna be able to hit people from a bit farther away. And reduced hellfire charge movement speed, so you're gonna move a little bit slower, so it's a little bit harder to zone, but you're gonna be able to use it a little bit more, and you're gonna have a little bit more range. And then slightly increased slowdown time after casting hellfire. So I think, yeah, overall what they're doing is making it so that you can use it more often, but it's not as good for zoning, so you can actually make it a little more interesting. I'm actually okay with this. I'm actually very okay with this. And then wolf form is actually just getting nerfed, so increase pounce attack charge time, and then increase scent orb spawn time. So you're not going to be able to use the get the speed boost as much from the orbs, and you're not going to be able to charge the attack as much because wolf form is the strongest part of Dark Lord. It is very, very powerful. And then they're just making bat form a little bit more comfortable to fly around it, which I think is okay. And then they're basically they're just nerfing Ghoul. They're making it so that when grabbing a survivor on the other side of a vault with the leap, the survivor is released at the start of the Ghoul's vault instead at the end, which I think kind of fixes the kidnapping tech from what I believe. And yeah, that's pretty much it for that. And the last one is hooking a survivor now spawns more blood orbs on Oni. Oni is getting a small change as well, which I think is cool. Not a crazy change, but I guess that's neat. I guess it depends. Maybe they give him 5 orbs instead of 2, which could be nice. And other than that, they're going to be doing some perk updates, and that's going to be everything for this patch. So there's definitely some very interesting aspects. Again, I'm not a huge fan of the slugging changes. The tunneling reduction could be interesting as long as maybe they make some additional modifications to it and change some of the numbers potentially to how long some of them are going to be. Again, I think it should be 3 hooks instead of 6 if they are going to add it to the game. I think 6 is way too lenient. It should really just be 3 so that you can't just tunnel one person out. You have to at least hook someone else at some point. I think that would be more feasible. That'd be more feasible. And then depending on how good some of these aura effects, the barbecue and chili, the pop effect, and the haste, I think depending on how good those are, it could be acceptable, but it just depends. It just really depends. And other than that though, I think this is going to be one of the most game-changing updates this game has ever had. And I think as long as they listen to the feedback, they take some of the data they have and try to make actual good changes with the feedback people are going to give, this could be a really cool update. This could be a really cool update. And I will say though, this will be so good for solo queue survivor. This will be so good for solo queue survivor. And as long as they do it correctly and they actually work on it, this could be really cool for weaker killers as well, but it just depends. It really depends. Like I said, I think there's potential here. People who are, doom posting that, oh, this is the end, I think they're over exaggerating a little bit, because I think this is very, very salvageable. And I think there are some really cool things they can actually do with this. Again, there are some aspects that are a little scary the way they're posted right now, but again, this is a PTB and they can change it. And even if it makes it to live, that's just data they can collect and then make a change maybe, I don't know, a month after it comes out. And at the end of the day, that's not a huge deal. I'm okay with that. As long as they make the changes, within a timely fashion, I think this could be really, really interesting. But again, I want to hear what you guys think. Let me know in the comments down below. And other than that, I will see you guys in the next one. Take care.